Hello, this is a short little introduction video on how to use or how to the interface in Illustrator is laid out. It's very almost identical to Photoshop, which is really great. I love that. So again, here we're just on the home page of Illustrator. When you open up Illustrator, this is what it looks. You have the recent files you've been using, and then the left-hand bar is the same. So if you want to open a file, of course it's open. It's going to actually pull up and show you where to open it. But we're going to click on a new file. So this is going to bring up the new file, new document kind of window. Okay, at the top bar, these are actually called presets. So they will depend what you want to do. If you're creating a design for an iPhone, then you're going to use mobile and like a web page, of course. If you're printing something out, then you're going to use a print preset, branding, social, so on. And the film of video, if you're creating like a YouTube thumbnail or something like a video kind of thing. So those are helpful, okay? And underneath it, I'm going to actually go over, I'm just going back to web here. This is actually where you give your name. So I'm going to change it to, I'm just going to actually commit to test, okay? And then underneath it is the width and height, okay? And this is basically your width and height of your document. So now I have, these are actually increments. And like, I'll go with this, pixels, points, pixels, and inches. So a lot of times the rulers are set to inches. So, but we'll just leave it what it is. So if the presets basically change depending on all the settings there, okay? So if I'm going to print, it's going to change that to points because points usually would use in your printing something out, okay? And then you have the width heights. Orientation, basically landscape, it's long and tall. Orientation, it's wide, okay? And the artboards I'm talking about, it's basically your page you're printing on. They call it artboards in Illustrator. Then also we have the color mode. This is really important depending on what you're using. The two different things you're actually using: web, printing something for digital screen, or printing something out. So mobile and web, you're printing something for a digital screen, and then print, you're printing something out. So those will actually change. You can see like it changes as settings what preset I'm using. So the CMYK is actually the color mode you want for printing something out. You can change that. So RGB, which is actually a color mode for digital screens, but it's going to give you an error message. Okay, so it's saying like, hey, this is not the right color mode when you're printing something out. So I can change it back to CMYK. So now I'm going to change it to web here. That color mode will automatically change because it knows when you're printing, when you're actually creating something for a digital screen, you're going to use RGB color mode. And also, the raster effects is set to 150. Stands for PPI, which stands for pixels per inch. So these pixels and then per inch. When you're printing out, they'll automatically change. You want the highest pixels per inch, the highest resolution, the highest quality you want, and that's 300%. Okay. In the web, you can go to 150, but definitely the lowest you want to go is 72. Right. Okay. So that goes to the presets here, and now we'll kind of change. But let's go. We're going to choose letter here. It will automatically change, like if I want to use my inches as my increments, I'm going to go to inches and it will automatically change. That's what 16.12 points is equal to when I go to inches. That's 8.5. And that's pretty much what I want. So it just creates my blank sheet of paper, my artboard, right? So I'm going to quickly go over some things real quickly. At the top, you have your menu bar. Okay? That's covered our nose. The menu bar, basically going over the file, is actually where you're going to save your document, do different things like that. Edit, copy and paste, you know that. Object. In Photoshop, you're editing images. In Illustrator, you're creating objects. Okay, and that's why you're editing your objects there. So if I want to create my repeat or pattern of my object or something like that, type is you're creating type. You're editing your type. Okay. Select, we're going to skip over that. Effect is actually creating like maybe a blur effect, or maybe distort, or pixel, or stylize, or texture. Those things are your objects, right? The view is actually how you view your documents. So you can zoom in, zoom out. So different things I'm pointing out for you. Or smart guides to actually check. Those help you align things, make sure things line up correctly, like centered or all aligned on the left side. It's going to help you. It's kind of like a real time kind of help you help to actually make sure you align things. Okay, and also guidelines are actually permanent. I think they're still guidelines to help you align things correctly, but they're not as temporary as smart guidelines. Smart lines just show up and go away, show up and go away. But guidelines is actually there, right? So you actually can hide guides, make guides, stuff like that, And also I'm going to set up the, this view kind of thing, like that. And also the most important thing on the menu bar is actually the window, okay? And this is a full long list of all the panels and all the toolbars you need to use. So like for instance, my color is up here, okay? Or like we're going to actually talk about like a navigator right here. So navigator, that's a window we're going to talk about later. So I'm going to do it up here, okay? And in addition to that, so basically all the panels, like it talks about gradients, that's in here. Talk about history, it's up here. Talk about graphic styles. So those are all here, and actually has some underneath here. So like under the T's and S's, those are down at the bottom. I'm going to go up to the top, okay? So now along with under window, you also have workspaces here. Workspaces are how your toolbars are laid out, okay? So right now, this will set to Essential Classic here. That's pretty much the one we use default in this class. But I'm just letting you know, depending on what you want to do, if like I'm creating some of your website, I'm going to go to the web preset. And those toolbars, those tools will automatically change. But let's say I want to go to window, workspace, and go to painting. Let's say I'm painting something. Those will actually change depending on what you're using Illustrator for. So I'm going to go back to Essential Classic. And I'm just letting you know, also, if you like something like maybe I move this out, I delete it, and something's wrong. But if I go back to reset here, workspace, and go back to reset, that thing is going to show up now again. This is a preset of how that toolbar should go over. Okay, and right below the menu bar is called the control bar. Okay, so this control bar changes depending on what you're using. So let's say I'm using my text. I'm just going to create some text real quick, and that will change depending on what tools I use for my text. Okay, I'm going to click on that. This is my selection tool. I'm just going to leave that. Okay, so then it changes there depending on what you're doing. And so we're creating objects. Again, with your objects here, so I'm just going to the shape tool and actually showing you, like I'm just creating a simple square. Okay, and they have the two options here. So within your objects you're creating in Illustrator, you have your fill and your stroke. So fill is actually a solid square, and the stroke is basically called it's the outline around your image. So right now I'm sensitive black, and I don't have any stroke. But let's say I've changed that color of the inside color to yellow, and it changes there, and it changes as well to there. So fill and stroke, same thing. Okay, and let's say I want to change my stroke, and let's say I want to change to black, and now it's a real thin line, but I can bump that up and make it thicker there. So this is thickness of my stroke. Okay, so look at my fill and my stroke. This is my fill and my stroke, and this actually just tells me kind of what it is. Okay. So also, if I want to change my fill, I can double click here, just like Photoshop. These are actually just, I can kind of like guess. It's like, that's a yellow I'm using. But these are actually called swatches. We'll talk about them later. These are predetermined colors. If I want to use that same color, if I want to change it to whatever I want and go back to that color, that's the exact same color every single time. They're called swatches instead of actually using a color picker. So that's helpful. That's one of the things in Illustrator they do. We're going to go over the ways to zoom here. So it's exactly the same way in Photoshop. We have the same 5 ways to zoom. So we have the status bar down here, which actually is just a list of different way of zoom levels. It's like 50% or 100%, whatever that. In addition to that, the second way is actually the zoom tool. You got this plus sign down here. And if I hold my Alt key down, it's going to change the minus symbol. It's going to zoom out. Zoom in and zoom out. Okay? Well, I'll zoom into this. Okay? That's the second way. The third way to zoom, we brought up this window and to navigator. So now this is actually showing me what I'm looking at. And then actually is different reset levels of zoom. So 30%. Now if I go too much, 6-7%, it's actually showing you like, oh, I'm only showing this portion of it. So that, I'm going to go back to maybe 100% and close that. So this is the third way to zoom. Okay. Now the fourth way to zoom is under Window View, I guess, and this zoom out says Control plus and Control minus. I click off that. So I choose Control, no matter what tool I'm using. If I choose Control and plus, it's going to zoom in, and minus, it's going to zoom out. Okay, that's the fourth way to zoom. Now the fifth way to zoom, it's actually just the exact same in Photoshop. It's my preferred way to zoom. So it doesn't matter what tool you're using. Let's say I'm using the Shape tool or the Selection tool, and hold down the Alt key in my keyboard, and I scroll the wheel of my mouse, and it's going to zoom in, zoom out. Okay, so if I want to zoom in this area, it's going to zoom in to wherever my cursor is. I zoom in to areas. So that's the 5 different ways to zoom. So again, status bar, zoom tool, Control plus and minus, navigator window, and then like Alt key and scroll with the mouse. Okay. So now I'm actually quickly go over it. Like there's something I'm going to touch on again on this edit. There's a lot of different preferences on the way things are kind of increments of how things are kind of adjusted in Illustrator. So real quick, these are actually just settings of how you want to fine tune and tweak the way Illustrator looks. So real quick, I want to point out actually this where it says user interface. This is how Illustrator looks. So like this is actually for you here. If I want the toolbars to look really large, I go into large or small, but it kind of readjusts everything the way it is. And this is actually the brightness. It's like you can bring it up or bring it down depending on your brightness. And this is actually the color back here. Okay, this is actually how the user interface means, like how Illustrator looks. And then you can change your smart guides here. Or you can change the color of your smart guides as default to magenta. And then you can use the grids and guides. This is actually those grids I talked about before, what color they are, and then like your guides, you can set up how small the squares are in your grid, or how big they are, depending on these grid lines, every 1 inch and stuff like that. So those are different things. Okay. So quickly, I want to just touch on this slowly. That also, this is the object you're creating. I just showed you before. That's a green fill and a black stroke, right? So I just showed you before. And also in Photoshop, you're editing images, but you can't put them in Illustrator. So like for instance, these are JPEGs. If I scroll over that, you can see that there's a square here and there's no square there. That means this one is actually put into the file. It's called embedded, and this is called linked. That means that file is actually somewhere else on the computer and it's linked to this document. Okay, this one actually is inside this Illustrator file. This one is linked again, and this is actually just a JPEG. So those are all raster based, like made for pixels. You can see here, just zoom in, it's made of pixels. And these down here, where the dogs are still a pixels based. Okay, and this one is pixel based. So the linking or embedding doesn't change the document. It's still raster based, but you can actually change. So that goes over the different things on the way Illustrator is laid out in your interface.